Hey folks, just want to go through with a little bit of with you guys with a little bit of planning, going through how to frame the floor of your building. Um, Inside your lesson, you should see following diagram showing you the different parts of our floor. So this is the frame that supports the rest of the house. You got these header joists on either side of the floor. They're resting on what's called a sill plate, which is resting directly on the foundation. And what you have the entire length of this building are beams that make up what are called the floor joists. And depending on how wide this is, you may have piers or posts underneath supporting those joists. The question we're asking right now, as we plan to frame the floor for this building, is how many floor joists do we need? So we're going to take a look at that. It's going to take a little bit of math to figure this out exactly, but it's not that bad to work through. So taking a look at the building that we have the foundation for so far, thinking about planning this out, we're going to have our floor joist. You'll have one on one end here. Just You'll have another one on this end, and you'll have a bunch of floor joists in the middle. Now, we don't typically want to use more than we're required to, because these tend to be fairly expensive pieces of wood relative to the rest of the frame. So to minimize cost, you only want to use the minimum required number of floor joists. And so obviously our building is 12 feet. I'm going to write that in inches because we're going to need some inches for our calculation. So 12 feet is 144 inches. And for most building applications like this, a spacing of 24 inches is the minimum requirement between floor joists. I'll post a link in the lesson looking at the actual standards for Georgia. The spacing actually depends on the overall span of the floor joist. It depends on the material that floor joist is made out of. And so there are published requirements and building codes for what these floor joist spacings are going to be. But we're going to use 24 inches for our building, and that should be more than enough. Now, if we think about this, we don't want 24 inches between the joists because the joists themselves have a width, and typically we're going to use like a 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, maybe up to a 2x12, depending on how big your building is, to support that. And so if we think about this span of 144 inches, if I've got my building here, I'm breaking that span up into widths of my building material and the spacing in between them. So if we look at this, I'm going to let n be the number of these floor joists that I'm using. And so I've got, if I'm using the nominal width of the actual joists themselves, I've got 2 inches times n joists, that is going to make up this 144 inch span, plus I've got a number of gaps in between that. And so if I look at my floor joist here, I got a minimum of 24 inches between the joists is what I'm looking for. And if I've got 2 end joists, I'm going to have n minus 1 spaces in between those joists. So I'm going to put n minus 1 there. And this is a quick little equation I can use to figure out how many floor joists minimum that I'm going to need. So 2 inches times n, here I've got 24 inches times n minus 24 if I distribute 24. So I got a total of 26. n minus 24 is equal to 144. I'm going to add 24 to both sides, so I got 168 is equal to 26n, and of course divide both sides by 26. Let me find my handy dandy calculator. I get 6 point something, 0.461. And what this tells me, if I just use a span of 6 inches, that's going to create, or excuse me, if I use a 6 floor joist in my design, that's going to leave me with too much space between those floor joists. And so obviously we can't have a fractional number of floor joists, so we're going to have to round this up to 7 floor joists. So 7 is going to be the total number of floor joists I need to use in this building design in order to meet that minimum spacing requirement. Now what that means is my minimum spacing is actually going to be a little bit less than 24 inches, but by using 7 joists, it's going to make sure I've got enough. So maybe the next question we need to ask is, how much space do I need between these floor joists? And so if we think about it, we can kind of draw out what we're looking at. This is going to be kind of a top-down view of these floor joists. We got one on the end. We got another one on the end. And so that's 2 of them. So we got 5 more spaced in between here. So we'll probably have 1 in the middle, like 2 on either side. And typically when you're given the specifications and like the building code standards, it specifies center to center distance between joists. And so I'm looking for this distance in between, going from the center of one joist to the center of the other joist. And that's the distance that's going to tell me how to space these guys out. And if you kind of count through what we have here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So n-1 spaces to worry about. And since that's going from the center of one joist to the center of the other joist, I know that total distance is going to be my 140 inches minus half the joist width on this side and half the joist width on this side. Well, since those joists, I'm assuming, are 2 inches wide, I got 1 inch on this side, 1 inch on this side. That's going to be 144 minus 2, which is obviously 142. And so, if I think about the center-to-center spacing between these joists, I've got n-1 spacings distributed over 142 inches. So if I take 142 inches, divide that by n-1, which in this case is 6. Let's punch that in the magic calculator. So that's going to be 23.66666, so 23 2/3 of an inch. 2/3 is not, a super nice number to work with if you got a tape measure, but 23.625 would be, 23 5/8 inch would be the closest tape measure value. And that'll definitely ensure that I'm underneath that 24-inch minimum spacing between my joists. And again, that's pretty close to that 24-inch spacing, so I'm not spending a bunch of bucks on some extra floor joists helping to keep my cost down. So in the next video, I'll show you guys how to actually create these joists in SketchUp so that you can continue building your building.